And finally, I'm super excited because we are going to our final adjustments. So into the lessons that are going to improve your final work and going to create amazing results. As you can see, we are pretty much done. All our retouch is done. Dodge and burn is done. Our face is clean, sharpened, maybe not sharpened, but has a lot of dynamic. So now we have to work a little bit on the sharpen, as I said before, but right now we are going to work with sharpen and later on about the colors to create really amazing final result. So how I'm going to create the sharpen, it's a very simple method, and that's really great thing to create a stamp before we go into this sharpen step. So I'm going to duplicate this layer twice, and let me call this, I'm going to rename this as a low and as a high, the same as in a frequency separation, of course, because I'm going to use frequency separation to sharpen the image. And in the low, of course, we're going to blur the layer, and we could use a Gaussian blur, but the one problem with Gaussian blur, it's really great if your computer cannot handle a surface blur. Using Gaussian blur is really great. However, a bit better results can give you actually surface blur. That's the point. So Gaussian blur is okay. However, if you can wait, if your computer can handle, surface blur will be really great. And the reason for this is, as you can see, surface blur is really heavy. And okay, radius is just our actual blur, and threshold we can build actually difference. Let's have a look if it's going to change. If I'm going to pull up threshold too much, it's going to break out the edges. I don't want this, so I'm going to find the threshold when it's not affecting the edges, and thanks to this, the edges, so the areas I don't really want to sharpen the image, are going to stay the same. There was 8, and I believe that was right because I was trying this before. For the purpose, as you can see, it's not affecting these areas which I don't want to be sharpened, so it's really great. And radius, I think it might be a bit too strong, so I'm going to go down to keep really soft blur for it. And with Gaussian blur, you would go the same. As you can see, I'm going to the point where the cheek and the skin seems to be really even out, like very soft, something I don't want. So but without not too much. As you can see, it's all soft, but we keep control. We can see everything is over here, right? But we even out the skin pores. So this value is okay. And the same with Gaussian blur, you would do just even out the areas that to make this not see any kind of detail, but it will be probably a bit lower than when we use typical for frequency separation retouching. It would be a bit lower in this case because our skin is really right, so I would probably put the value as I was given around 12 before. It would be probably around 8 for this size of the image. But I just guess. I would have to see this to say this really right. And the problem with surface blur is, which you can notice right now, it's progressing really a lot of time. So I'm just going to give you this a bit better option, but to save your time, sometimes it's just better to use Gaussian blur. So finally we get to this point, and maybe what's worth to say, if your computer is killer machine, use surface blur. If not, better go with Gaussian blur. But right now, finally, it's a better step. So we're going to the high layer. And the same as in frequency separation, image, apply image, layer in that case will be low, blending add. And I'm going to invert this. So hit OK right now, and I'm going to zoom this a bit better, but a bit closer. So you're going to see how that sharpen our image. I'm going to set vivid light at first, and I want to turn on visibility on this low layer. And as you can see, that's the before and that's after. The vivid light giving very soft sharpen, And of course we set up this for the purpose of really soft sharpen, but unfortunately anyway it affected some of the areas I didn't want to. If we go with linear light, the effect will be stronger, and it's way too strong for me in that case. That's why I usually go with vivid light. However, anyway, I'm going to pull down the opacity till around 60%. Maybe that case will be alright. And what I want to do, I'm going to create a layer mask, and using the black color, I'm just going to clean the areas I don't really want the sharpen. So maybe not with 100, but 60. And for sure on the nose over here, this area is quite rough. Maybe not rough, but we don't want to sharpen such an area as this one. Lips, they were already a bit sharpened, but over here we don't want to sharpen this. I don't want to sharpen the fingers, because if we sharpen them, they might get a bit rough. Once again, we were working on them not for the fact that we want to bring up all of the details from before. So like this. And of course this area where we have a lot of hair, surface blur usually could resolve such troubles. I could put actually threshold even lower, so it wouldn't affect that much. But of course this area is not something we want to sharpen, because we have a lot of tiny hair. So when we do this, we can actually bring up too many details. That's why I prefer to stay careful with this area. And the neck over here, it's quite clean. And of course hair, I don't want to sharpen them really, or at least not that much. So I'm just going to clean over that area. And I need to look on the layer mask. It all looks fine right now, and I'm looking at the image, and the image looks fine as well. So yeah, that's the first step I usually do. So I'm going to put this to the group, or now I can remove this low layer, and I'm going to call this sharpen. Other step, which will be optional for your sharpening process, is adding some noise to the image. I have to say, I not always add some noise. I'm sorry for this. I decided to clean this area. You can remember this area was rough. I don't want to bring up details from that point. Okay, so now we can go to the noise. And about adding the noise, the thing you need to know, it's kind of optional, but sometimes it can work really great. So I'm going to create a gray layer. I'm just going to call this gray, and I'm going to fill this with 50% gray, edit, fill, and 50% gray, hit OK. And I'm going to change this into soft light. And now let's go to filter, noise, and add noise. Once again, the value of amount of percent you're going to add depends on the size of the image. I'm going with Gaussian monochromatic, and as you can see, when I go too high, you can see what is happening on the image. It doesn't look so well, and too low, it won't be really visible. But this size of the image is not that small. It will be around 5%. If the image will be smaller, the amount will be smaller, so we have to adjust this. We can check the preview, and that's really small change, but it's working really nice. And the same as before, I'm going to create layer mask, and obviously I want to clean up this from the hair, this time with 100%. I don't want any of this on my hair. I don't want this on the eyes as well, because I was sharpening them before. And also, I don't need the sharpen on the eye from the previous lesson, because as you remember, we sharpened them. I don't want this on the fingers, on the lips, of course. Noise on the lips is never a great idea. They has to be smooth, nice, and glossy. So yeah, that's how it looks like. I'm looking at the image to find more areas, and of course that area won't be really necessary. But I did this with soft pressure, so it still stays fine. Yeah, and that's how it looks like, maybe a bit lower here. So now I'm going to create a group for this, Ctrl-Command-G, and I'm going to call this sharpening. So let me zoom this image just a little bit to make you see the difference, because from the distance it can be really difficult. However, I'm going to zoom over here on the skin texture, and that's the result before and that's after. I believe you can notice it, because right now I can see it over here. As you can see, we have really even out the skin, but after this sharpening step it adds a little bit of noise, a little bit of sharpening, and we can actually see a very nice skin texture. So that's how I do sharpening. There is of course few methods. I find this method, what I used over here, the most powerful, the most useful for me. However, I recommend always to try and experiment with different methods.